So, in this video, I'm going to explain how South African politics will potentially, not even potentially, will spill into UFC, specifically Kamaru Usman versus Dricus Du Plessis. Right, so I think some of you have already heard about what's happening in South Africa, some of you have not. And I think the UFC was kind of aware when they were making this fight. I'm sure they were hoping to somehow get the benefits of the conflict, basically. So I make this video as a South African because I feel like there's so many perspectives that exist online, and because I'm in a unique position where I'm South African and I'm a super UFC fan. I feel like I'm in the perfect position to actually have an opinion about this particular topic. So let me basically get to what's happening. Obviously, some of you have heard about the anti-illegal immigration protests that have been happening in South Africa. So a lot of people have made it look worse than it actually is. A lot of media outlets have sensationalized what is actually happening. They say things like xenophobia, attacks, we hate black people, Afrophobia, and all these type of things. And to me, it just looks like people who are worried they can no longer exploit South Africa. They can no longer utilize what's it called, cheap labor, exploit foreigners. Um, in a nutshell, let me explain from the South African perspective, and I will eventually explain, or I'm going to try to make this video as short as possible. So I will give you a summary of what is happening in South Africa and how it's going to basically affect the fight between Kamaru Usman, or rather how it affects the fight between Kamaru Usman and Dricus Du Plessis. So in South Africa, we have a problem with a lot of illegal immigrants. I know that globally, the world sees Africa as a jungle with a lot of huts, but that's not actually the case, especially in South Africa. South Africa is one of the most developed countries in Africa. In fact, it's probably the most developed country in Africa. So, as a result of that, um, not just that, we have been praised for having the best constitution in the world, but all that means is that we are open to being exploited. And what makes the situation even worse is that our politicians refuse to apply the law. So in South Africa, immigration laws basically state that you have to invest about 5 million rands. In dollars, that's like $250,000. Yeah, 200, maybe let's say around $300,000. If you are going to start a business in South Africa, if you are coming for employment, you need to have a scarce skill, right? So a lot of these, a lot of African immigrants, what they do is that they come into South Africa with the guise of visiting, and they never leave. They apply for asylum when they don't even qualify for that. They bribe officials in the country, sell drugs, commit crimes, compete with the poor locals for the local economy. So, for example, there's a spaza shop. I don't know if you know what a spaza shop. It's basically mini markets, like mini shops where you can buy like quick things, like if you want rice or whatever the case is, like as opposed to like going to a supermarket. So that particular industry is worth about 200 and something billion rands. In dollars, how can I quantify that? It's worth approximately, maybe, let's say, $15 billion, right? And a significant, not even as a fraction of what that industry is worth goes into the South African economy. That's one of the biggest issues that we have in South Africa. And not only Is that the problem? A lot of these foreigners make counterfeit products that end up killing South African kids. When you travel to other countries, you have to have medical aid. These foreigners come into South Africa and demand free legal health, or rather, free medical services, which is meant for citizens, right? And obviously, immigration laws are meant to actually protect the interest of the citizens. However, because of people the what do you call it? South African Human Rights Commission. There's even a petition to actually remove it because it doesn't do anything, or at the very least, from what I've read and from if you ask like a common black South African what the Human Rights Commission has done that they feel like they've benefited from, they'll tell you nothing, right? So there are so many issues in South Africa, including corruption in our government. So the country has been pushing for the count for or rather the South African citizens have been pushing for the government to actually enforce South African immigration laws, but they are refusing basically, not outrightly, but they are not doing anything essentially. So it has gotten to a point whereby, like, even South African kids are unable to get into schools because foreigners are taking those particular spaces in those schools, resulting in South Africans not being able to occupy or go to school, right? So because of that, we have millions of illegal. Like, we don't have a problem with legal immigrants, right? The problem is illegal immigrants because you can't even quantify them. If someone kills you, like I'm a victim of that. My dad was killed, and no one has been arrested. It's been like over 15 years. No one has been arrested. I'm a victim of that. If someone is here illegally, if they kill, how are you going to find them? You can't use their fingerprints. You can't, like, there's no way for you to find them, right? So that's part of the issue. So it has gotten to a point whereby South Africans have said, you know what, we are going to do this ourselves since the government is refusing to actually get a handle on this particular issue. So South Africans have been marching, and obviously, when you feel like people, when you tell people to go home and fix your country, and they don't do that, and in turn they start to disrespect you. Obviously, some marches might not be as peaceful, but generally, I'd say around 80% of the marches have been very positive and not necessarily, or rather positive, I mean, there haven't been any type of violence, right? So, how this now comes to, okay, before we get to that, so because of these marches, a lot of these African countries are very angry, right? They are very angry that South Africans do not want them to exploit South Africa, right? And for some reason, global media has the same stance, right? They have the same stance that we should be allowing all immigrants to exploit South Africa. For whatever reason, they are covering the stories as if South Africans are busy being barbaric in South Africa, which is not the case. So it's honestly baffling. It just feels like there's propaganda of some sort. Um, so, in turn, because of these marches, a lot of Africans have been particularly upset. And the most upset countries out of all African countries is Zimbabwe, Ghana, and Nigeria. Nigeria has been the most vocal of them all, followed by Zimbabwe and Ghana. Right? Nigeria has been very disrespectful, like we are called stupid, we are called lazy, all because we refuse to be exploited. And they are okay with that, right? So as a result, there has been this feud between South Africa and particularly Nigeria, but obviously including Ghana and Zimbabwe, but particularly Nigeria. For some reason, they feel entitled to South Africa. I don't know why. A lot of them like to mention the fact that our leaders were given the ability to go into exile in other African countries. But they forget that our soldiers in South Africa have been in the DRC fighting wars that are not even ours, right? There have been so many things that South Africa has done for the African continent. They don't really care about that. They will tell you about, yeah, your leaders were here, but the fact is South Africans died for South Africa during apartheid, but Africans will claim that. And I think if you have been watching soccer, the FIFA World Cup, you would have seen something of to that effect. Whenever South Africa was playing, you would see a lot of Africans favoring the opposite team, which whether it was Canada, whether it was Mexico, it didn't matter. Whether it was Korea, they were favoring the other team. It's a result of that, right? So that's how it comes into this particular fight right here. Kamaru Usman versus Dricus Du Plessis. It's a clash, not just a regular fight between pretty good athletes. Because if you look at this fight, it's not like a normal fight that you would have thought, okay, yeah, this makes sense. It's the type of fight that you are like, how did this come to be? Like, I mean, no one is complaining. It's a really good fight. I'm excited for it. But based on the fact that they are doing Nigeria versus South Africa, and the fact that Kamaru Usman is in the welterweight division, Dricus Du Plessis is a former champion, it just aligns very perfectly with what's happening in South Africa. And I feel like that is going to amplify the magnitude of this particular fight, right? And I felt like it was necessary for me to make this type of video, because I feel like towards fight week, you're going to see a lot of things that are misinformation. I would encourage that you search for videos that are made by South Africans as opposed to people from other countries, because a lot of them are really upset that we are saying do not exploit South Africa. They have a problem with that. Just be objective. And I just felt like, I mean, that this is information that I had, and I feel like it's useful to some extent. You know, especially leading up to fight week, you'll see things that are going to be very confusing to you. Like, yeah, why are they showing people like chasing each other in Africa? What's happening? So, hopefully, this context helps. Thank you for joining me. I love and appreciate all of you. Till next time. Deuces.